Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new year and a new live from Boys Town Parenting. My name is Gabby. I'm your host, and we are live today with two incredible guests to talk about how to teach digital literacy to your child, but not only your child. I think as a parent watching, we have so much to learn in the ever evolving digital world that we are in, and there will be a lot of good takeaways from this live for you and your family. Before we begin, we want to introduce our guests. So in the middle here, we have Suzie from Smart Gen Society. Suzie, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. It's great to have you on. Tell
Thank
us
you so
more
much.
about yourself and Smart Gen Society.
Sure. Well, I'm the strategic development manager at Smart Gen Society. And Smart Gen Society is a nonprofit where we go out and educate kids, following our mission to empower kids to make smart choices in a digital world. We go out to schools, teach curriculum K through all the way through higher education on the skills and the knowledge that kids need to obtain to navigate safely in this digital age.
And then to our right here, we have Bridget Barnes, our parenting expert that many of you know and love. But maybe if this is your first live with Boys Town Parenting in the new year, Bridget, tell us more about yourself and your role at Boys Town.
Okay, well, I'm the director for parent training here at Boys Town in Nebraska, but we provide common sense parenting all across the country for hundreds of parents and thousands of children. And one of the chapters in the Boys Town Common Sense Parenting book is on cyber peer pressure and setting expectations and routines for online behavior. So I'm super excited to talk to Suzie today about this because I know we just got done with the holidays, right? And kids got lots of technology, lots of screens, I'm sure, and how parents can manage that. And as we open up our classes this year, we wanted to talk to the experts about that. So I'm really excited to talk to Suzie today about helping kids make better decisions online.
Yes, so if you're watching live, make sure you like this video. And if you have any questions for Bridget or Suzie as we go through our chat, you can leave in the comments. And maybe if you're watching this video later tonight or over the next few days and weren't able to catch it live, you can still leave your comment and I'm happy to facilitate and get you an answer that you might need. And of course, we'll always be linking relevant resources and links in the comment section of this video, as well as the hyperlink to check out Smart Gen Society and their pages too. So we're talking about digital literacy. Let's start. What does that even mean for children in today's world, and why is it so important, Suzie?
It's really teaching children how to navigate and teaching them the tools to how to safely navigate in a digital world. What our main emphasis is that we really want to educate kids based on the age appropriate and age development, how to safely navigate these devices and how we have control over these devices. These devices do not have control over us. So that's what we think digital literacy means today in the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I'd like to say that I agree so much that it is such an important conversation to have, but it's not a one-off conversation that parents should have because the online is changing all the time. And so with that, this is an ongoing conversation and that kids really have to understand that, screen time is a tool and not a right. They seem to think it's connected to their hands and that they should have it at all times. And so I think it really is important for parents to understand that now the internet is accessible everywhere and all the time. I mean, when I was growing up, you went to a certain place, there was the computer or there was the phone, everybody could hear you and see you. And that is not what is happening in today's world.
Yeah, and a common concern for parents of younger kids is when is it okay to open up my child to the digital world and allow them to view a screen, whether it's the TV or the iPad? Mm-hmm. Do we have any guidance on that, Bridget?
Well, I think Suzie probably would be the expert in this area, but I always tell parents, to delay as much as you possibly can, especially while children are young and their brains are developing, delaying that. I believe that most children, by the time they go to school, they're going to see a lot more screens. And I think that's not the time to go buy them an iPhone at first grade, but it's time to begin those conversations, begin to teach, begin to expose kids what they can be exposed to, what they are not going to be allowed to do online. But I think that maybe Suzie can chime in and give us some insight on what the experts say.
Thank you. I agree with Bridget's sentiment. Delay, delay, delay. All of the research now is saying if you can delay, especially anything with a browser on it, for our kids, the later, the better. But it really starts with birth. Because it's almost like we have to be mindful of our digital usage as we're navigating and raising our kids. And so once again, they're going to listen to 1% of what we say and 100% of what we do. So if they see us constantly on our devices and we are missing out on all these unbelievable opportunities to talk to our children, to bond with our children, that's why we say the education piece really starts at birth. The regulation or the Academy, American Academy of Pediatrics, really has strong recommendations behind when you should put your kids behind a screen, and no time ever before the age of 2 years old. And all viewing, even after 2 through the early preschool age, should be co-viewing. That means you're just not handing your kid this device to play with. You're actually navigating it with them. Mm-hmm. And then what you start to do as they developmentally mature, you take baby steps. It's like riding a bike. You want to start with a big wheel, move on to a tricycle, and then you move on to training wheels and then the real bike. We look at technology as the same type of development. Take small steps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know, sometimes there can be arguments where when parents are like, well, I'm having them watch an educational show like Miss Rachel. So is that bad because it's a screen, or we're saying no, nothing at all, 2 and under?
It's a great question. I recently attended a conference where somebody was speaking on behalf of Sesame Street. And if we look at Sesame Street, they were really one of the first educational technology programs that was created. One of the reasons why they think that they were so successful and still are is because when we watch Sesame Street, there's a start and a finish. And then most of our parents co-viewed that with us. They learned the songs, they knew the rhymes, they knew the characters, and then they talked with their children about those experiences. So it's okay to watch those programs with them. So that co-viewing is the essential piece that we want to tell parents, because that's where real learning takes place, with that question and answer back and forth with the parent and child.
And when you're saying co-viewing, that's not, we're sitting in the living room and my child is watching the TV, but I'm on my phone scrolling TikTok.
That's exactly right.
I'm watching actively and paying attention to what's happening.
That is exactly right. That's where they say that real learning takes place.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
We tend not to think of it as an interaction between 2 humans. We're interacting with a screen. Mm-hmm. And so it's really parents trying to take that charge of, no, I'm involved in my child interacting with the screen, and stopping at times and talking about what we just experienced. I think, Susie's right on about the parent modeling that. Where do these screens belong at our household? Where do they not belong? How much time do we spend on that? And how much time do I model that to my kid? Have I ever sat down and talked to my kid about online safety and what do we do if we are exposed to a predator? Those kind of things. So I think, very much that's a conversation that every parent has to have, and it has to be willing to have again and again with their kids, and to model that, because like Suzie was saying, they're not always listening to what you're saying. They're watching what you're doing.
Yeah. And what tips do you have, Suzie and Bridget, for modeling good technology use? I know, for me, I'm trying to make a point to when when it's 8 p.m. at night, my phone is upstairs charging in another room and I am not on my phone. And that seems like a little goal because, it's already 8 p.m. The day's almost over. But how can parents, especially in this new year, set measurable goals of reducing their own screen time and trying to be more present in a environment that totally sucks you in and is so hard to set boundaries around?
I love that you say that. We say use the killer Bs. Be present, be mindful, be balanced. Those are the examples that we should be setting for our kids. One of the things that we think is important that you can do within your own homes is have areas of your homes, especially as you introduce kids to technology. Those are the technology places that we're going to use that technology in open areas of the home where we can watch you. We also say, make sure that you have technology-free zones in your house too. When we sit at the kitchen table for dinner, we're not having our phones out. If we have family movie night, there will be no technology. Nobody will be scrolling as we really watch this movie together. So those are some really just small practices that you can begin with. And the other one we really like to say, take opportunities to talk with your kids one-on-one and be present. And there's no better place to do that sometimes than dropping them off for school and picking them up. In the car, you can say, no one's going to be on their devices in the car unless we go on long trips. I really like modeling that for my kids. And I always say to them, if you don't have anything to say before or after school, that's fine too. It's just being present.
I agree totally that whole engaged leaning in of parents gets their kids to do that as well. And I really suggest to parents to start shutting down technology. The closer we get to bedtime, technology wakes up the brain. So we don't want that to happen because we want people to go to sleep. So taking those things away and putting them in places where kids really don't have access to them after a certain hour is good. And they start their bedtime routine to start winding down, read a book, do other things. With teenagers, I really ask parents to use I guess I would call these the 3 Ps. Teach them that there's permanency to online behavior, things that you think you can put up there and they're never going to see again. And next thing you know, you're the president or CEO of something, and then we have a picture of you doing something. It's pervasive. It goes everywhere. You think, oh, I'm just online talking to my friend, but you don't know that you can be talking to a lot of people if that is shared out. And, your privacy is, you can't put information up on the internet like your address or where you're at or what you're doing because everybody has access to that. But I really think, what Suzie is saying, I'm really hoping that our listeners are really listening to that because talking to kids and helping them not be afraid of the internet. We don't want to create fear factor here, but we do want them to understand the importance of this tool and how it can affect them mentally, socially, in their behaviors. But I tell every parent, if a child is not willing to follow instructions in their daily life, guess what? They're probably not going to be willing to follow instructions online. So once you get that down, if you're struggling with that, you're probably going to have less online access because you can't follow instructions to clean up your room or come home on time or whatever the case might be.
And when you talk about privacy, and I love what you said, Bridget, of the digital world, granted, it does have a lot of trouble, but there are still great things that come of the digital world. And so, wanting to open up our kids to all of the good parts of it, of course. Suzie, how is Smart Gen Society, when you guys are going into schools and talking to kids, talking to parents about privacy and what does that mean? And when you set up an account, common practices with that, how do you start that conversation and what are you teaching them?
It's a great question. I love going out to schools. One of the things that I do is I model what they think privacy is. So I put them in this simulation where I ask a student to come up and we act like we're in line at the movie theater to get a snack. And I'm a complete stranger and I just start talking to them. So they have to improv and say, what would you do? And most of the times I start asking them, what's your name? Where do you go to school? And they look at me like I'm crazy. Why would I ever talk to you? And most of them will say, I don't feel comfortable talking to you. I'm not talking to you. And then I use this information. that's exactly that feeling that you had with me that I want you to have online. Every single person that you could be approached by or talk to online should be considered a stranger. And you have to be so mindful of who you talk to online. We also really try to convey the messages. Once you go online and create these accounts, there's no such thing as privacy anymore. Anybody can get that information. We really try to enforce this concept of you have a digital reputation. And that starts out as soon as you create these online accounts, especially with social media, and that reputation can follow you all the way through adulthood.
Yeah, and some of these social networking apps have gotten so savvy where now Snapchat has what's called a private story. So, if you're a teenager, you might think, well, if I'm only adding 5 girlfriends of mine onto my private story, it's just them, it's private, I can share whatever I want. But we so have to teach our kids, everything can be screenshotted, everything can be saved, and private in social media at least doesn't really mean private. So
that's exactly right. It's almost like we have to take that term, and there's a digital privacy definition and then a real world privacy definition. And that's what we really try to reiterate to kids. And we want them to have that, that sense, that sixth sense in them, because one of the things is that what we realize, they're almost desensitized. They don't look at the people that they're talking to online as almost real humans. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem in itself. And what we know is that we find out right now is that parents are almost over-parenting in the real world and not parenting at all in the digital world. And that is where your kid is most likely to probably get into some trouble, is in the digital world, because that's where so many predators are.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes we look at what our kids are writing or what their pages look like, but we don't always look at what their friends' pages look like. When I looked at that, I'm like, oh my goodness, what is this kid up there writing? And it's supposed to be my kid too. And so, you really have to definitely be engaged, have constant interaction with their spaces and places online. Mm-hmm. Finding that balance. I tell kids all the time, I'm like, okay, think about your day. What's your daily life looking like? Is that all the time you're looking at a screen? I mean, no, I'm going to soccer, I'm doing this. Definitely. So on the virtual world, kind of look at how much time do I need to be spending up here doing this or that? And am I diversifying a little bit? You have to make, the internet fit around your life and not your life fitting around the internet. Mm-hmm.
So when you say parents are under-parenting when it comes to the digital age, for a parent watching who is saying, hey, I think that might be me, what are some actions they can take to kind of catch up to that baseline?
So like we said, you really have to know and be very curious about what your kids are being exposed to and what they're doing online. We think what we try to do with kids is we try to train them to be the first line of defense, to recognize what it looks like when someone could possibly could do you harm online, because a lot of times the parents just don't know. So you have to have these open, honest conversations with your kids about all types of subjects if you're allowing them to have a device with a web browser. What we're finding is that kids are being exposed to images, the amount of information, and the oversensitivity to all of these things is really hard on their brains. But this is interesting. They don't go to their parents and ask them what to do because they're afraid their parents will take away the device. So what we try to tell parents is have these open, honest conversations with your kids. Delay that web browsing until at least they're 14 years of age, especially when they're in their identity forming years in junior high. But it is also imperative that if you give a kid a device with any type of browsing setting, you have to use the parental controls. Within these cell phones, the parental controls, you can control the browsing network, you can control what apps they purchase, you can control screen time limits, you can control notifications. And we tell parents, don't hand your kid a phone and think that they can regulate any of those things themselves. Remember, especially in those junior high ages, that frontal lobe, reason and rationale not developed yet, and they're also in their most impulsive part of their development. A cell phone can really do a lot of damage to a kid who just has free reign on it.
Right. Definitely. I was reading a report that said that 40% of parents feel they're too overwhelmed to monitor their children's online activity. And I can understand that feeling, but I also know as parents, we have to be willing to protect our children. And we wouldn't just let them go out the front door and go about your world and run around and do whatever you want. No, we would be definitely involved in the real world. And so I know it seems overwhelming at times, but like Suzie is saying, if you take a little bit at a time to where you get acclimated and they get acclimated and a little bit more to where at age 14, they can be able to have a browser and they can be able to protect themselves. I think it's important to teach children online skills like how to protect against a predator, how to avoid cyberbullying, how to limit their exposure and protect their content, and what is appropriate and inappropriate content, how to, promote and reward good online behavior. If you teach skills to children, then they're going to be better capable of being able to manage their online experience, I would think. But, you have to stay tuned all the time. It's always changing.
Yeah, of course. And we've talked a lot about prevention of, when we're getting our kids set up in the digital world. Suzie, I'd love to hear more on, let's say we get a little bit deeper into it and our child finds themselves in a compromised position, whether it be they have connected with someone online who has put their back against the wall on a subject. Maybe they're gaming and talking to someone on an online, PlayStation game that is treating them poorly. There's so many situations. I'm sure you could speak to some of the more common ones.
There absolutely is. We recently did a training this summer with the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. And the FBI recently told us there was a report where really some of the extortion of our kids is significantly and drastically increasing in online platforms, especially gaming. When we go out and educate kids and parents, the most important message is you should not be gaming with anybody that you don't know. And then we teach the kids the red flags, what to look for. If they happen to have somebody who's asking them or talking about adult situations, that probably isn't a kid. If they ask them certain questions about where they go to school, what area they live in, we try to teach them like those really simple red flashing, what we call them red flags. But before they even get to that point, we don't want them to be playing in open forums. What we find is that parents are almost getting comfortable with the silence. My mom was one of 12 kids. I was one of 6. Both my grandmother and my mother would say, if it was quiet, something was wrong in the house. We should be thinking the same thing when our kids are online. Have you noticed that? It's so quiet. So parents almost like, oh, well, I'm able to do what I need to do. And that's a really scary thing. I think we have to get uncomfortable with that quietness, because the things that they're viewing can really go down a lot of rabbit holes. So if there is a situation where your child gets into where somebody is cyberbullying them and or exploiting them, first thing we ask them to do is stop communicating with that person right away. If you're communicating online with them and they threaten you, we also tell kids, put their phones in airplane mode. That way, any possible location devices that were open on their phone, nobody would know where you were at. If you really felt like your physical harm was being threatened, that's a simple cure-all. We also tell kids to go to that trusted adult who is that trusted adult in your life? I say these are always adult situations with adult solutions, not kids situations with kids solutions. And that's why when we go out and talk to kids, we also teach them, what does a trusted adult look like? And we point out the teachers in the classroom. We point out the parents, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins. Those are people that can help them. But we want them to know also, there's no shame involved with these experiences that they're having online. It's actually, the reality is, it's the adult's fault that we don't have better control of the technologies and the parental controls built in. And until that happens, we really have to teach them that it's not their fault and there's no shame in any situation that they get involved in.
Well, Susie, I was wondering, is there a way to review with your kid on a daily basis their digital footprint to kind of go over, okay, you were here and here and here. So if you buy them a device that has that can be managed that way?
Yeah, I mean, you can look inside each one of your kids' apps. And the important thing is you can see what they post, what they comment on, what they like, who they're friends with, who they're following. And when we go out and educate kids, we teach them what the appropriate platform, or at least when they initially get online on their social media accounts, what's a safe, what's the term I'm looking for? Profile. What's a safe profile look like? But yes, parents can manage all of those things. And we also tell parents, when you allow your kids social media for that first time, the recommendation is use it alongside of them. You should also be really curious about how this social media works. And that's also in the gaming industry too. Sit down alongside your kids as they game and be curious. Say, hey, why do you like this game so much? Kind of like that co-viewing with Sesame Street. We should be doing the same thing with games so you really understand what's going on these platforms.
Right.
So Bridget said something earlier in the live of, we don't just want to give our child an iPhone right away and open up the floodgates. Are there, my husband grew up and he had a, I can't remember what it was called, but you had to go to the store and like buy points for it. And I know now they have like bark phones. Is that something that you recommend?
Absolutely. There are so many devices that we can give our kids. And I know it's important for parents to want to be able to know where their kids are at. Mm-hmm. We understand that. It's the problem where it comes into is that web browser. We want to give them devices like the bark phone. And the bark phone, once again, can only take a certain amount of phone numbers and phone calls, usually restricts them to just to a couple. That'll keep them safe. And then slowly but surely start giving your kids devices with more platform usage and obviously more web browser usage, but start slow. I like the analogy I just heard recently. They said giving your 16-year-old or giving your 14-year-old an iPhone is kind of like giving your 16-year-old a Ferrari on their birthday. You wouldn't want to do that. You would never do that. So we had to be really mindful of just doing it. I like what Bridget said again, delay, delay, delay. That is the strongest point that we can possibly say on some of these very powerful devices, such as the iPhone. The longer you wait, the better off your kids will be developmentally, emotionally, and socially.
Mm-hmm. I know sorry, Bridget. We only have a couple more minutes here, so we'll do a couple more questions. But if you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I still have, there's so many ways we could go. This is probably going to be a series, and maybe one of a couple episodes we'll do this year with Smart Gym Society. So I know that we're kind of bouncing around a bit, but this is definitely something that's ongoing. Bridget.
I just wanted to say that, if kids experience bullying on the internet, it is important that parents do take that very seriously, but they stay calm and use active listening. Don't overreact, get really upset and make your child more upset. Be a support. It's important that you create online boundaries. Just like Susie was saying, you're going to turn things off. You're going to put on airplane mode. You're going to make sure that you get two people that can help you with your account and get things cleared up. That shared places and spaces online, making sure that you monitor that if bullying has gone on, but be proactive to try to prevent that bullying behavior, because it really can affect your child's mental health. And recently we saw from the U.S. Surgeon General saying some things that even kids between the ages of 10 and 19 are undergoing a high sensitivity to, feeling depressed because of their online behavior and experiences. So we want to, even though they're old enough to be there, even though they might even have the skills, the internet can be a very overwhelming thing. And so you do want to stay in communication with your kids, talking about time limits, parental monitoring, supervision, and ongoing discussion.
And if I could add a point to that, when it comes to the amount of time, there is now research that supports the fact that, especially in those teenage years, anybody who's using that screen time over 2 hours increases their chances of anxiety, depression, and isolation. So that 2-hour mark is really what that time limit should be for your kids, any screen time, especially in those teenage years with those phones.
Is that daily?
That's daily outside the academic school day.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I had saw years ago some data on American kids using that way more than kids in other countries.
83%, the average is 5 to 7 hours. 83% of teenagers are online 5 to 7 hours.
Yeah.
They will spend 114 hours out of the 114 days out of the entire year online, which is just
right.
And I always say to kids, I said, what we really, the message we want to send you guys is that that's keeping you from developing your gifts. You should be spending that time in the real world instead of spending so much time in the virtual world developing your real gifts.
Definitely. So for parents watching, I know we gave a lot of tips, a lot of info. Suzie, if you could recommend maybe one big takeaway from this video, what would you recommend parents start with?
Mm-hmm. The one big takeaway I would say is that phones are incredibly powerful devices, and we have to treat them like such. Technology is a wonderful thing, but use it to enhance your life. Don't use it for any type of negative ways. And remember that our kids are always watching us. We have to model good behavior for our kids in order for them to be responsible digital members of society.
Well said. Anything to add, Bridget?
Oh, wow, that's great. I don't want to add anything to that. I think, Suzie and, organization is so important to the attitudes of being online, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be respectful, be involved, be observant, be clear about your expectations, be aware about digital literacy of your kid. And if they're not aware, be available to communicate. I just love this. And I hope you come back and visit us again, Suzie, and share more.
We have so much to talk about, ladies. Yes.
Yes, we'll definitely come back. And if you're watching and you have something that you want us to delve more into, let us know in the comments, and we're happy to talk about it again very soon. Because as Bridget and Suzie said, this is not something that is going away. This is not something parents can kind of bury their head in the sand with, and we all need to grow together and adapt to the digital world and find its place in our lives and not let it take over our lives. So wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for joining. This was a really, really helpful live.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Wonderful. We have several things linked in the comments for you to check out related to digital literacy, as well as Smart Gen Society's page. So make sure you give them a follow, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, everybody.